Are here to talk about today is the fact that Kubernetes is chaos. So anyone who has ever worked with Kubernetes for the very first time, or if you've worked with Kubernetes for a long time, you probably remember that first time working with Kubernetes, and not even just Kubernetes, but maybe like Docker and some of these other technologies that are similar or related in some way to Kubernetes. But it tends to just be chaos. I remember like Jordan, do you remember when we were setting up that Kubernetes stack back in like June or however have you with like lightweight Kubernetes on the Raspberry Pi stack? I think
Sure.
I think it took us like all night, didn't it?
Yeah. Took us a while, and then once we put it together, we didn't exactly know what to do with it. So,
Yeah, because then it's like, okay, now I got to have a use case for it, and then it's like it has functionality, but then it's like you got to have reasons to have the functionality and all that
Mhm.
good stuff.
Well, and it's not the simplest thing to just start spinning things up in Kubernetes. So,
No, not at all. And it's like one of the other things about when you're working with Kubernetes is, it's a lot like how do I put it? So like when you go to a company who already has an environment up and running, they have like all this guidance. They're like, here is what we use. Here is how we set these things up. Here are the directions that our senior engineers set up. But what if you are the person who is building with Kubernetes for the first time and there is no senior engineer? You are that senior engineer or provisioner who writes the checklist to hand to people. Well, that's a whole different story because I come from working in like different kinds of environments, but then all of a sudden we're like, okay, so let's just build something really robust with Kubernetes from ground up, which I already know is going to take a long time. Well, one of the things we decided to start doing to make things a lot less or a lot more manageable is GitLab. GitLab is one of the convenient things that you can build on a Raspberry Pi. You can build it in a Docker container. You can build it outside of a Docker container. You can build it in Kubernetes. You can build it outside of Kubernetes. But Kubernetes is so confusing that if you just want to use Kubernetes, I'll show you what Kubernetes looks like. This is what Kubernetes looks like, right? And so if you want to come in here and you want to just like sit here and type things like get pods or something, or get nodes, whatever you're trying to do. This is Kubernetes life right here. It's like real exciting. But there are other ways to package what you're doing with Kubernetes where you can then instead set up continuous integration tools where you can come in here and say create a project. And at some point, I'll go ahead and do more with showing some examples of what you can do with GitLab. But one of the things that I've set up already is we've set up dashboards for monitoring Kubernetes as you're building in Kubernetes. And you can come into the tool that we built, and we've set it up so that GitLab, you can come over here and use GitLab to go and take a look at how your security's going. How's everything going? Or let's say that you're just trying to figure out like what commands you were running in Kubernetes earlier. You come over here and you could say, let's run some random stuff and let's try to find out what Kubernetes commands we were running earlier. And you can just find out exactly what commands were ran. And then you could come over here and be like, okay. So really, Kubernetes is really complicated to use and it's really complicated to do things with. But if you start using other tools to kind of help monitor what you're trying to do, especially if you're trying to like debug and things like that, or you're trying to wonder what's going on inside of a container, you can set up ways to monitor with Kubernetes. But it's already confusing enough to try to figure out where everything is when you're trying to build these things, that it's just nice having something that makes it a lot easier to organize. And this is something that we'll get into a lot more later on. But one of the things that we're talking about today is GitLab meets Kubernetes. And this is something that you can take a look at your own time, or on your own time, I guess. But like, for example, if you just go over to gitlab.com and check out their website, you can even come over here and type, well, if you don't click on the wrong thing, you click on search, you can type Raspberry Pi. If you want to learn on something as affordable as a Raspberry Pi, you can get GitLab on a Raspberry Pi. or you can get it on all kinds of different distributions. You know, it says try GitLab for free, so you can see they have a way to just like download it on their website. Anyways, I'll let you guys check out this website and all these things, and you can figure out how do you install GitLab, because if you go to GitLab, it shows. Oh, actually, my window's all blown up. So let me shrink my window so that you can see the rest of what I'm showing, because everyone can't even see everything that I'm showing on this stream. So I did some different things on the stream, so sorry for the interruptions, but we're going to fix it real quick. It's probably something I should have noticed earlier. But we're going to make it so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. Look at that. It's beautiful. So here, if you're on GitLab's website, you can see there are a couple of different ways to install GitLab. You can install GitLab on Ubuntu. You can install on with CentOS. You can use OpenSUSE. You can use. Let me move Jordan's face here real quick so that you can see what other options are here. It shows right there. You can use Raspberry Pi OS, and you can also use CentOS 8. And then there's all these other ways to install it. You can install it straight into Kubernetes. You can install it into Google's platform, Docker. You can go and they have official Docker images with instructions on how to set it up, how to install it, how to run it, how to do whatever you're trying to do or accomplish. And so really, GitLab is just a really handy resource, and you can see that it has like all these trainings and all these things on their website. It tells you how to install it. It tells you how to, right here, bam, installation. And you can scroll down and look at the different types of instructions for different things. It is a complicated platform. It's an engineering tool. I'm not so sure I would call this a beginner platform. It's a business tool for engineering. But if you're trying to get a job doing engineering types of things, you can install it in your own home and you can hang out with it. Or if you're a business and you're trying to figure out, how can I make Kubernetes a little more manageable? There are other ways to make it more manageable too, but this is just something that we've been working on for quite some time. I've been building a GitLab instance that's going to work in a container on the configuration for the Olympiad that we've been building, and something that's going to integrate with all of our wonderful dashboards and all that good stuff. So I guess, so Jordan, when you were first working with Kubernetes and taking a look at like all of the different versions, like what did you notice like when it comes to like the different flavors of Kubernetes?
Well, there's a plethora of them for one thing, so it can be difficult to figure out what you need to use for your particular use case. So that's the challenge, is determining exactly which flavor is going to be best for you.
Yeah. And then, like, if we're thinking about, okay, so if you want to learn Kubernetes, you want to start building with Kubernetes, like how to get started, or you know, what flavor of Kubernetes should we choose? And when you're trying to decide, you know, to build with Kubernetes, or if you're trying to learn GitLab, or you're trying to learn all these different things, that can be a little confusing to figure out, you know, how do I even get started with learning some of these things, or how can I set up an instance that I can pretty much build on just about any type of computer, no matter how beefy it is. I can set it up on my laptop, I can set it up on different things, because I could go over and we have all these different versions of Kubernetes. So if I just say install Kubernetes, we're going to get probably like the official installation of Kubernetes, like straight from kubernetes.io. We're going to get this thing that's like install and set up kubectl, and then it's going to talk about how to get Kubernetes installed and all those good things. Kubectl is technically not Kubernetes. It's a client for it. But then, you know, there's get started documents. But it's overwhelming, because then we have like versions like, let me just show you some examples. So if I just type micro, oh, there you go, micro K8s, that's another flavor of Kubernetes right there. So now we've seen two different types of Kubernetes. We've seen micro Kubernetes, we've seen official Kubernetes or whatever, but I'm just Googling things just to kind of show you, if I just keep Googling things, we're going to keep coming into more Kubernetes. But then there's kind Kubernetes, which is a flavor of Kubernetes in Docker. And then one of my favorite ones is if you go over to Rancher Labs, but I'll leave this on the screen for people who are like, well, what version of Kubernetes do I use? And I'm going to give you my recommendations, but I'm just showing you just how confusing it is when you're trying to figure out what Kubernetes that you might try to use. Because, different types of Kubernetes are going to act differently on different types of hardware. So then we have Rancher. If we go to rancher.com, rancher.com also has a flavor of Kubernetes called K3S. And there you go, lightweight certified Kubernetes. And it just keeps going on and on and on. But what I'm going to show you right now is the one that I like to test with if you're, or just building certain things with. It's called Kubernetes, well, it's just K3D. So if I just type k3d.io, if you go to this website called k3d.io, this is probably one of the easiest ways to just start using Kubernetes. Whether you're trying to build a project, whether you're trying to do tests for a project, no matter what you're trying to accomplish with Kubernetes, honestly, K3D is just super convenient in how it's built. It has a full set of installation instructions, so I don't need to necessarily go through that. Sometime if someone's curious enough, maybe I'll spend some time showing people some of these things. But like, I don't know, I work with this stuff all day long, and I don't sometimes just like showing entry level things gets really boring. But but you can go and spend time trying to install this, and I'm not opposed to going in at some point making some sort of a guide or anything like that. But even Jordan, when you tried to install this on a Jetson Nano, did it give you any issues when you ran it, or did it just install it?
Pretty much just installed it, as I recall. Fortunately, the Jetson Nano, the software package that it comes with, actually includes Docker already, and I don't know if you probably don't even need Docker to install K3D, do you?
To install K3D, you actually do. So.
Oh, okay. So perfect. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. I mean, I think it was just a matter of using those commands. I'm trying to think there was one little issue, but yeah, I mean, I think it was super simple to get over. So
the Jetson's pretty neat. So if anyone's ever not heard of a Jetson Nano, so we develop on a number of ARM boards, and then we also develop on other things, but primarily like Raspberry Pi, Jetson Nano. You've probably seen Raspberry Pi before, because
certainly if you've watched our channel at all, you certainly should have.
That's right. Actually, I can even just show that the Raspberry Pis that we build. So on the screen there, if you're looking on the feed, on the left, that like we build little supercomputers out of Raspberry Pis. But there's another one called Jetson Nano, and if you take a look at what a Jetson Nano is, what this is it's kind of like, I guess it's kind of like a Raspberry Pi, but not quite. It's a small ARM board like Raspberry Pi, but it has pseudocores in this little set right here where that heat sink is. So for anyone who hasn't played with the Jetson, they're pretty interesting. They run an operating system. You said flavor Ubuntu, right, Jordan?
Yeah, the operating system appears to be a flavor of Ubuntu. The Jetsons have a lot of very similar I/O to a Raspberry Pi. They've got the camera and the screen ports. Well, I don't know which Jetson you get because they have different ports depending on what Jetson you get. But we've got the Jetson Nano 4 GB version, and that's got very similar I/O to the Raspberry Pi. It is a little bit larger than a Raspberry Pi, and the CUDA cores give you a lot of different. They give you a pretty different compute, like application set essentially, right?
Yeah.
And so these are really, I mean, the thing that NVIDIA pushes them for is AI learning and AI applications.
Totally. And so like you can do so much with these. And then one of the cool things about like with things like Kubernetes, you can set up like those little AI tools, which we haven't gotten around to doing all of this testing yet. But once we get the AI stuff working and the motion sensing and like all those bits, all of that information can get sucked into these dashboards where we can just continue to make more sophisticated dashboards that do more things. Where this one is a general, security dashboard that I've shown a number of times. But like right here, if I want to know, what Kubernetes commands I was running, like I can even use this to help me kind of like debug and track what's going on with Kubernetes. Because if I come in here and then just type something else, so the last command I typed was sudo kubectl get nodes. You can see it right there. And then if I go over to my little tool right here, I can see that that's the last command that I ran, and it's live. So we can set this thing to be live. So we can say, let's just set it to refresh itself every 5 seconds. And let's set it to look at the past 2 days, because that's gonna be a lot more interesting than just 1 day. But I can cross-reference information. I can see like which user account was leveraged to push this command in my test. And this is all running, this is all Kubernetes running from K3D, which is, this is K3D right here, which is what I was talking about and showing earlier. And then, of course, since there's stuff all over the place when you're trying to build with like Kubernetes and stuff like that, sometimes it's just nice to have tools where you can have a way to like set it up. And the main thing I've set up mostly is like the back end and the things like getting the monitoring metrics so that you can integrate your health check information, all that good stuff. And I can pull up these dashboards, all the exciting things. So that's something that's pretty, well, just convenient, so that I don't have to, I don't have to go all the way over here into my development center and then dig through my containers and stacks, and who knows what madness is lying in this crazy thing right here. Like this sure, it helps with management to an extent, and then just using like Kubernetes straight through the client, that's fine too. But ultimately, we can just store repositories and whatever we're trying to do directly in GitLab, and we can get information on what's going on with the Kubernetes clusters in GitLab. And so right now I'm kind of focused on just kind of integrating everything and making sure that GitLab can see things. And like this is a test iteration, this is a test environment, so everything that I'm showing you now, this is not like a production environment that's serving or hosting customers or anything like that. This is just a little sandbox that's just living inside of, once again, these little kits. So I'll just show you like on the screen. Like that kit right there, like we build this stuff into these. One of those things on the screen is what is all of this is running on top of. So, you can build whatever you want into this. You can build a security operations center dashboard if that's what you really want. But really, for those who haven't heard of GitLab, this is a tool that I would just like recommend playing with. And if anyone is wondering, how can you get started with this? Honestly, just go to GitLab's website. GitLab's website is awesome. GitLab's website is so helpful that I would have to make a lot of videos to make some stuff that's better than what they want to do. One of the things that I'm working on is I can even, in our own GitLab instance, when you install GitLab and run it on your own hosting, it has all of the help resources in your installed instance too. So I can just say Terraform. Oh, it's awesome. Yeah. Usually it has guides. Well, let's see. I thought it had guides. I had found some in here. Oh, wait. Maybe it's in the help docs. Maybe go to help. Load. There we go. Here we go. So I maybe I have to like dig through some of this. There is so much in here. It tells you how to use the tool. Like you don't have to know. Yeah,
it's good to have too much documentation rather than too little.
Yes, and so really by one of the reasons we started integrating GitLab into our platform is because it just is so heavily documented in ways that will help you build whatever you're trying to accomplish just by getting GitLab. And you can just start setting up your repositories, you can just start setting up your integrations with things like Docker Hub and things like GitHub and whatever you want to integrate it with. And Terraform, we're going to integrate. Well, it's already integrated with Terraform for what we're doing. So I've been just setting up like integrations and things like that. But clearly, I can just keep scrolling. It's talking about all the things like how to create GitLab pages. We can click on this and figure out how to create GitLab pages, which are basically GitLab is kind of like a web browser for development. But you can come in here and you can make everything you need. You can put together your workflows, and it walks you through how to do it. It walks you through the commands. It tells you where all the resources are, and honestly, like just getting your own stack and then putting like GitLab in your own environment that's like your own install that you can just sit there and just kind of build with. Like this is such a great way to just kind of get started with building things. And it integrates with things like Jira and other tools that can be used for project management and things like that. But it's just a really nice tool. I there are other nice tools on the planet, but the thing I like about GitLab is it's something that they even provide guidance for with like ARM platforms, because there are other tools that work on ARM and stuff like that, but GitLab works on just about anything. You can install GitLab in Azure. You can install GitLab on like any old desktop of who knows what sort. It doesn't really matter. You can install it on anything. You install GitLab on your laptop. You install GitLab wherever you want, but it makes it really easy to kind of keep what you're building together, and kind of makes it easy to also build like a place to collaborate with whoever else you're working with. And so this is a feature that we're going to be building as more or less like the front end of our Kubernetes development center for like the little tool that we build. So for those who are going to be building with us, we've been building something called the Olympiad for quite some time. We're packaging it, and in the past we've talked about like the Olympiad white paper and things like that. But now that the Olympiad is more than just a white paper, the white paper I think is about maybe 1/4, or maybe at this point maybe even like 1/8 of what the whole Olympiad is. But when we finish building all of this and you install this, then basically you'd install this package that we've built, and then that package that we've built is going to have like a GitLab with pre-built resources from us on top of GitLab's guidance and on top of all this stuff. And that's just something that we've been working on. This is all open source. This is not stuff that we're...
Well, and the other thing that's nice about GitLab is right?
Yes, it does. So and it also is designed so that you can integrate things to where it'll maintain what you're doing. So if you can set up GitLab to make it easier so that it has configurations that'll do like maybe weekly updates for certain services, or maybe weekly rebuilds for certain things that you're working on or whatever you're trying to accomplish. You can even configure GitLab, because it's a continual. We can talk a little bit about what is continuous integration, because that's a very big question.
Sure.
So, what continuous integration and continuous deployment. Wait. Delivery. For some reason, I forgot if CD is continuous delivery or continuous deployment. But either way, what's CI/CD is what, like, you'll notice the term CI/CD. And that's what that stands for, is continuous integration and continuous delivery. It might be deployment or something. For whatever reason, right now I'm mixing up whatever that D is probably. But that's, if you ever see that, GitLab is a CI/CD tool as well. And what this means is, let's say that you have like your development Kubernetes or your development cluster.
Yeah, it looks like delivery or deployment, either way is correct.
Oh, interesting. No wonder it's confusing. We're like, you can do either one. We're like, which one's right? That's correct. It's like, wait, but what's the right one? Yes. It's like, I just want to know.
I mean, delivery and deployment are kind of the same thing. I don't know. They might not be, though.
Sure. So if we're gonna have... Oh yeah. While I draw this, go ahead and elaborate. Let's see. development Kubernetes. So if we have a development Kubernetes cluster and we have like a production cluster that's hosting things that are like shouldn't go down, at a high level, we can just bluntly state that the production cluster should not go down. Ideally. Things happen, errors happen, bugs happen, all the platforms go down. AWS has gone down, Azure has gone down, Google Cloud Platform's gone down, all of them go down at some point. But ideally, you want to have a way to make sure that your production cluster doesn't go down. But better yet, when you're trying to make updates for your production cluster, you want to have a way to have some form of development that lets you effectively, let's see, have continuous integration and development into whatever the cluster is. So let me just like change the color of this. I don't know why the color matters, but ultimately, continuous integration and continuous development means that you can update features to your production cluster without taking the production cluster down. So you can basically like ideally the goal is to add features and upgrades seamlessly without interrupting people's experience. So like for example, if you're watching Netflix and every now and then you have like little outages on Netflix, or maybe your internet might go down at some point, or maybe the you know, who knows, whether it's Netflix having a problem or your internet having a problem. It's really frustrating when your Netflix show suddenly freezes up and suddenly locks. Well, Netflix has to have a way to constantly update and upgrade their clusters, and they can, with their developers, set up tools like GitLab here, where they can come in here and set up like things like system hooks, for example, and they can set up repositories and all these different things, and they can make sure that SSL certificates, which manage, you know, add encryption to pipelines and things like that. You can set up all these things. You can set up keys to deploy. You can do all this stuff. You could change the appearance of it. Well, changing the appearance of GitLab doesn't matter so much, but what does matter is that GitLab has the resources to make it to where from a development cluster of whatever you're trying to do, and not just GitLab, just continuous integration and continuous development tools, it makes it so that you can just go and do exactly that. If I were to just draw the arrow and just outline that, that is how we do those seamless updates without interrupting anything. We just need to be able to way to make that possible. So that right there brings us all the way back to GitLab, which we can then slap right here. And ultimately, GitLab solves this problem where, you know, we might build things, we might do all this, whatever we're trying to do, whatever we're trying to accomplish, but ultimately we want to have like the best way we can possibly have to make sure that like we can make our updates, add our features, do all of our stuff without anything whatsoever, ideally taking down our production cluster. So like that's what we build. We build tool suites. That's what you do. Maybe not the most exciting thing for those who aren't tinkers, but for those who are tinkers and like to build things at home and like to have things like your own Kubernetes cluster that's hanging out, where maybe you do a lot of things manually. And some other tools that you can integrate with GitLab is you can start to bring in other tools like Terraform and things like that, which Terraform is an automation tool. And you can start to integrate some of these tools into GitLab so that GitLab then can, you know, manage those tools that you use to make all of these little updates and upgrades and all this stuff matter. And then you can, over time, automate more and more and more. And then you can get to the point to where you can have GitLab and Terraform be capable of spinning up additional entire production clusters anytime you want. So basically, you can construct production clusters as well. So if I were to just outline
So Terraform would essentially be executing a set of instructions, and GitLab would be where it's getting all the data to perform that set of instructions, right?
Yeah, that's a good way. Yes. So the way Jordan put it is pretty good. So GitLab, more or less, is where you would have a series of instructions that machines need called repositories. So GitLab is a repository hub. And then Terraform is a tool where you can then execute and I guess configurations
Mm-hmm.
and like pre-configured systems to operate a specific way without you having to go manually build these things. And so you can have GitLab integrate with other tools like Terraform, things like that, and then you can effectively then have Terraform like even like fabricate your production clusters, and then once again, GitLab is capable of maintaining those production clusters, or at least whatever long-standing cluster you're running. Like if it's
Yep.
your home security cluster and you've got Pi-hole in there with like DNS, you probably don't want your DNS to go down either because that's annoying. But whatever you're using GitLab to build or automate or manage or maintain, the thing about GitLab is it's a place to save your code. It's a place to store your code, and like you could go over to like GitLab's website and like they have so much going on in here. Um, like they have a whole community. They have the GitLab community. They have GitLab for education, GitLab for open source. You just click on this stuff, and then right here it even talks about world class continuous integration and security, so on and so forth. So they talk about all this stuff too. It's not just me who's talking about these things these days. It's all rather commonly used stuff that's rather helpful. So for those of you who are trying to get into development or who are doing development and you're trying to figure out different things you can do, check out GitLab. We're going to be using GitLab for things that I use on my personal projects and for things that we use on, say, like the Olympiad. Um, this is what we talk about. So really, the Olympiad is what I use to be able to build for fun, and then Jordan does this full time. So this is Jordan builds toolboxes, which is awesome. And so one of the things that we're ultimately going to be able to do is like our little toolboxes will be able to pre-configure other toolboxes. That's one of the things that we're working on that I'm really excited about. Where and I'll go ahead and show like those kits again. I guess we have different ones, but long story short, like software is what makes hardware valuable. Is the software going to allow you to do things that you want to do or accomplish? And we put a lot of work into making sure that the hardware tooling works really well with the software that we're doing, and
Sure.
that we run, build, operate all that good stuff. So that's pretty much we're getting there. So I guess Jordan, do you have any other thoughts on like or questions yourself even about like continuous integration and things of that nature? Since I feel like we've talked about the concepts more or less.
Um, well, I mean, I guess it's just continuous integration and continuous deployment, or continuous delivery are really, really, you know, critical when it comes to cloud computing because it's something that you don't ever want to go down, and it's not something that's necessarily easy to spin up once it is totally down. So you kind of want it to continually work and be able to, I mean, modify itself and make the updates, and repairs that it needs to in the course of its life cycle. So anyway, I don't know, I guess that's all I have to say.
Totally, yeah, and it's also helpful because like Jordan's been building with us since before we had any of this stuff built, and we did it like all manually.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
oh man, and Jordan knows how painful and time consuming it is. I remember like just playing the game Hide and Hunt. That's on this YouTube channel. You can go to my YouTube channel and look for a game called Hide and Hunt, and it took. I actually streamed the setup of that. It took a really long time to configure for just one
Yeah.
simple little simulation. It was like a hacking simulation. then I think it took a long time for us to play it too, which that's the point of the game, so that part. But even just like configuring things, setting things up, and then trying to set that up again for it's a lot of work when really you can
Yeah.
take things like setting up those like the hide and hunt game and stuff like that. You can build the configurations into GitLab, and then you can have Terraform automatically prepare the simulations for you or automatically prepare your game for you. Whatever you developed, who knows what you developed? I developed a hacking game, but that's with this little tool right here that says Athena 0. I also use the Athena 0 tool to manage my Kubernetes connections and stuff like that, so that it's a secure gateway solution to make it so that I can. But yeah, so I develop some lower level applications that are more for, I guess, professional development, or for learning professional development, those things. But yeah, so that's the stream for the day. So I guess we'll be back next week talking about more of this types of stuff that we're into, because why do we do these things? I don't know. We just like to build stuff, and really, also, it's just fun to make it easier for other people to build stuff, because like
Yep.
we build the tools, and then you guys gonna make some sweet stuff. And then on Thursdays, I do the DevSecOps Dojo, and Jordan's there too. Jordan's building the hardware kits, helping us like with the software and all that stuff. And then I'm building the software. I'm in the dojo, and then during my work days, I work and engineer with Blue Mira. So if anyone ever wants to know about sim technologies, maybe one day we'll talk more about the value of sim. Why do people need sim? That's a big question. So we won't talk about that right now, though. So